shall be conducted pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.021, and members may appear electronically. Should any member appear electronically, all votes shall be taken by roll call, and each member of the board will be able to hear each other. Citizens can view a live stream of the board meeting on the library's YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/user/watchpub library. A recording will be available after the meeting on the city's website at rochestermn.gov/agenda. View a live stream of the board meeting on the library's YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/user/watchpub. The first item of discussion is approval of the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to review? And can I get a motion to approve?
Actually, Aaron, we do need to do the public comment period. There
Oh,
is a calling number if anybody wants to make public comments.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize we did those virtually. This is Aaron. I also vote yay. Did I miss any of the others? I'm looking at the virtual list here. Aaron, I also vote yay. Did I miss any of the others? I'm looking at the virtual list here. I'm sorry. Sorry, I can't hear that. Can anybody else hear?
I think it was Karen and she muted herself.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Okay. Well, of course, we'll start today, but motion is approved to approve the agenda. Next up is the consensus agenda. Can I get a motion to approve? Or any discussion? Motion. Thank you, Ann. Got a second? Hi, this is Kristen. I second. Thank you, Kristen. We'll vote by any further discussion?
I do not.
Okay. We'll move on. We have a friends report today.
I'm so sorry. I'm struggling with the streaming too, so I'm. I can report the Friends did have their
I do not.
latest meeting, or they met in person for the first time in 16 months, and they are starting to have regular meetings again. They are also working through what to do and how to restart the bookstore eventually. In the meantime, they had another sidewalk sale this past weekend and raised over $1,000 again. So they've been doing some great sales this summer, and excited to get back in person and meeting, and we'll see what happens for that next month. So
That's really great. Do you know, was there a lot of foot traffic to the sale?
I believe so. To make over $1,000 on 50-cent items is pretty significant.
Good point. Thank you. Thank you for that report, Karen. Can we move on to the Spousal report?
The fall when we'll have plenty to report on. So thanks for asking me anyway.
Thanks, Brenda. We'll move on to the youth representative report. Arhan or Sarah?
I can start off. This is Sarah. Again, just more of the same, kind of getting ready for school, back to school type of things for most youth in Rochester. In fact, a lot of schools are starting to have their scheduled pickups, and depending on the books that certain classes may require, we may see some certain books that maybe the library has checked out. But other than that, I think youth in Rochester are kind of feeling for some, impending excitement and others impending dread of the start of the school year, especially after a year kind of away from school and away from that. So a lot of kids are probably feeling the stress of going back to an unknown environment and one that they have been away from for so long. And so a lot of the libraries kind of activities that you guys just provide normally, like being able to come in and have a relaxing afternoon, checking out books and things like that, will just become especially important, I think, for a lot of kids in Rochester, a sense of normalcy when a lot of other things in their lives are changing. So hopefully you guys will just be seeing that and just being able to recognize the unique time of year it is for lots of youth in Rochester, and I guess the library's role that you have always played and how especially important that is this year.
Yeah, so to add on to the sort of like back to school thing, when I had attended the school board, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So when I attended the school board meeting the past month, the superintendent's sort of like idea was that kids who are above the age of 12, or grades which kids are above the age of 12 generally, so like I think it was like middle school and high school, would not have to wear masks at school. But this was before the real large prevalence of the Delta variant in the US and in our area, I guess, Olmsted County. So I know now that that the I sort of recommend, I think the policy now is that everyone is going to be masked when they come back to school, but I think they're still planning on being in person. And I just wanted, so basically my question was like with like the Delta variant, like how how RPS had a response. I know the public library has like maintained sort of like they reinstated their like masking policy. And if I could ask you guys, like, do you guys know what the future is going to look like for like COVID safety at the library?
Well, we follow the city guidelines where all public city buildings have a mask requirement. And so initially when the occurrences were low, we were just masked in the youth services area, but now we're masked throughout the whole building, whether you're vaccinated or not, and that will continue for the foreseeable future.
Okay, great, thank you. I also wanted to say that this is my last meeting on the board, and I really enjoyed my time in the one in-person meeting I got to meet everyone at. So yeah, thank you everyone, and I had a great time.
Sarah, did you have any comments? I believe it's your last meeting as well.
Yeah, of course, similar sentiments. As someone who grew up obviously in Rochester and spent a lot of time at the library, coming getting books for myself, staying and reading in the lovely sitting areas, and it's just been such a big part of my life here in Rochester. So as I go off into the world, so to speak, it's just going to be something that I will really cherish, how special the Rochester Public Library is and just what a big role it's played in my life. And so I'm very thankful for this opportunity to have been able to give back to the library and be able to make sure that other youth in Rochester are able to have the same wonderful library experiences that I had. So thank you all so much, and wish you all the best. Hope to see you in the future.
Well, I'll just say those are heartwarming comments. Really appreciate that, Sarah and Arhan. We've really enjoyed having you. I just have a couple words I'd like to just share, and they really are words. I just want to thank you for your perspective. You bring an excellent perspective to the board. It's something that we had been missing, and we were searching you out. So really appreciate your ability to jump in and provide those comments, your perspective and your comments. You've got a great energy. Really appreciate your confidence. It's not easy to stand up even virtually in front of a board, a city board. So really appreciate your confidence to do so and your approach. You've just been an excellent addition to the board, and we greatly appreciate everything that you've brought to the board. So on behalf of everyone here, thank you so much. Yes, definitely hand clapping. And I believe we have a recognition.
Just a quick clarification. Sarah, are you around actually for a couple more months, or is this your last meeting?
I will be in Rochester, pending what AmeriCorps decides to do. It's really, a lot is up in the air for the program. So my guess is that I will be around, but again, I'm more than happy to step aside to let other students in Rochester have the chance.
Okay, thank you.
And Audrey, do we have some recognition for them as well? Would you talk about that?
Yeah, so we will be sending you both certificates to express our deep gratitude for everything that you both have done. And so, of course, our plan was to hand it to you in person today, but we will instead be sending that to you.
Great, thank you both so much again. We'll move on to the Personnel Committee report.
And that meeting was canceled, so there is no report today.
Okay, thank you. Next then is our updated committee assignments.
So in your packet, let's see, there is an updated on, let's see, it's page 58.
58.
They're updated committee assignments. We do really appreciate Scott volunteering to be on the Selco board. So I will notify Selco, Scott, and I will put them in, Krista Ross is who I will put get you in contact with, and then you will get invited to their board meetings. And then Dominic, we went ahead and he's on the planning committee.
Any questions or concerns about the committee assignments? Okay, we'll move forward with these then as written. Next up, we have new business. Audrey, can you walk us through the action plan?
I sure can. So as we were working on everything that's been going on, we knew we needed to get this updated, and as we were also working on the 2022 budget, we'd been talking about all these actions, but we didn't have a document. So the team put together the 2021 and the 2022 documents just to make it perfectly clear what staff are working on to achieve the strategic plan. So and then again, how it relates to the logic model and outcomes. So with that, I will throw it open for questions. You know, the fine free evaluation actually happened earlier this year. The mobile app is coming shortly. That's being worked on. You're going to hear more about hours evaluation. So we are working on all of these. You will actually hear some updates on all of them today, or almost all of them today. But I would open it up for any questions.
I don't have a question, just a comment. It's always great to see these because it just reminds us all of the work and all of the different angles that we are progressing through our action plans. It's just fantastic work, so appreciate that. Thank you to the team. Okay, any other questions, comments? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the board meeting time.
So I know we've got most of the board is still currently working, and I know we have some conflict with work. I know we also have some pressures also with childcare. But I just because the meeting time has always been this time does not mean it always has to be. So I at least wanted to throw it open for discussion. But I'm not looking for any specific outcome. I'm just trying to make it as easy as possible for people to attend.
Thoughts from the board?
Sure, I'm happy to share my views. I feel like, you know, at the end of the day, almost any time is doable for us. I would say that regardless of the time, I'll try to make the board meeting. However, in my opinion, 4:30 is one of the most logical times, as it's near the end of the workday, but also allows people that are parents to still collect kids before daycare closes. So I wonder if maybe, you know, sometimes some of our issues with attendance are more related to our ability to prioritize our board meeting or plan in advance as opposed to the time itself. So I would prefer the time stay as is unless there is overwhelming support for a new time.
Thank you, Antonia. Stephanie, do you have thoughts?
I would agree with Antonia. I mean, it works out currently for my schedule, and as long as I know it's on my calendar, I'm aware of it, and I can plan as best as possible, barring any emergency meetings that I have to attend for my work. But I think unless it's, like she said, overwhelming from other board members at this time and date just doesn't work, I'm up for that change. But currently, it works for me as is right now.
Thank you. Kristen?
Hi, everybody. So my thoughts were going to be pretty similar. I don't have any other commitments. Well, I have some, but I don't have, I guess I have a cat, but that's pretty easy to deal with. So I would have went either way on any changes that the board may have suggested. So, but 4:30 works for me. I'm a bus rider, so I'm able to, I've always worked with my employer that once a month I'm going to leave work early. So, or hop on directly after work if it's virtual. So I am also, I mean, I'm cool with any changes, but I also think it's fine if it stays the way it is.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. Scott?
Yeah, I can make any time work personally. I'm just curious as a new member. I know at the last meeting we had to have the meeting canceled, or not canceled, but we couldn't vote on anything and had to have the second meeting just to approve everything. I don't know if that's a regular occurrence or not, but if it is, that might, suggest that there is an issue. But I'm not saying that anybody has I'm not faulting anyone for that, because things happen and work things come up, and that happens to all of us. But I'm just curious if that is a normal occurrence or not.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Scott. I think, I don't recall a time where we've had to call and group everyone together after the meeting. But there has been a time, maybe in the last year, maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, where we don't reach quorum and we can't necessarily make decisions in the meeting. So it's not a huge problem, but it does occur once in a while. I do think that gets back to Antonia's point about prioritization. And by being on the board, we are agreeing that this is important to us. So we need to make sure that that's showing in our attendance as well. So I'll just remind the board that if we keep the meeting at the same time, which it sounds like we will be, based on comments here, we still each need to do that personal prioritization. So just remind everyone of that. Okay, so I'm hearing we keep it at 4:30, Audrey.
That sounds fine. Yep.
Thank you.
I at least wanted to bring the option up.
Appreciate that.
I have a quick question. Did we, for those that weren't able to attend today, have we received any information from them via email or get their feedback so that we can make sure everyone's voice has been heard?
Yes, we generally do hear from people when they can't attend.
Well, I mean, for this particular issue, I know when we had met in person, those individuals that were there that aren't at this meeting had expressed, wanting to also talk about, different time and date. It would be nice if we could, somehow get their information as well, or because they're not here, so we can't hear they're here, obviously their side of it. And I want to make sure all the voices are heard on this. So.
Yeah, Stephanie, that's a great point. Could I ask one of the staff members to send maybe Perna can send a request via email if anyone feels strongly?
Sure, we can do that.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Stephanie. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on then. Really excited to hear about the RFP for the Chateau.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that you're supportive of us working on this.
Hi, this is Kristen, and absolutely. I think this is awesome. I don't know any other words except for awesome. So yeah, I'm in total support. It's really exciting.
I do think it's a huge opportunity. It falls right into our wheelhouse to use that space for a community gathering place that we support. I love the idea. I'm excited to see what the team comes up with.
This is Stephanie. This is a great opportunity. I do have a question though. I know that we had something similar or contract out with the Mayo Civic Center previous to 2020. And I was wondering, did we use that space as well, or were we just using that as a overfill if needed for certain programs?
We had very limited success using the Mayo Civic Center, mainly because of the short window of time where we could book it. Most of the time when we could book it, we didn't have time to plan anything or publicize anything because of the nature of it. You know, when you can only book it within 90 days, that's not a lot of time. And so, I don't know, is there anybody else on the team who wants to make a comment?
Yeah, this is Kim. I would also say that during the interim when the Mayo Civic Center management was transitioning, there was a really strong interest in engaging the library to activate the Mayo Civic Center. The management has changed at Mayo Civic Center, and we just do not have access to that space. We're not getting the same sense of urgency from the city for them to allow us to use it. Of course, nothing is normal right now. We're all recovering post-COVID. They were very helpful during the flood, but when that interim group left and the more permanent solution came, we just no longer have access to the calendars to schedule.
So with this new RFP, would there be a lot more flexibility in organizing events that would be different than we were doing with the Mayo Civic Center?
Yes, because every single partner is a city department.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to express my support for it as well. I think that's exactly what they should be doing with the Chateau. So I think you're doing great.
Perhaps a formal motion of support.
This is Kristen. I motion.
Thank you, Kristen.
Make a formal motion.
Okay, second.
Thank you. I'm sorry, was that Scott with a second?
Yes.
Great, thank you, Scott. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll vote by roll call. Stephanie?
Aye.
Antonia?
Aye.
Kristen?
Hi.
Sarah?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Arhan?
Aye.
This is Aaron. I also vote yes. Did I see Dominic has joined us?
Aye.
Thank you. Am I missing anybody else who has joined? Great. Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you. We're excited to hear how it turns out. All right, we'll move on now.
We've got some work to do. Yeah.
No better team to do it. We'll move on to old business.
We have
Research.
the revenue recapture edition.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Audrey.
Yeah. So here's the situation. We used to use revenue recapture. We have not used it for well over a year. This is where we can capture revenue from the state, like through people's tax rebates or tax refunds. But we have quit using it because of fine forgiveness and our policies around equity. And what's precipitating this conversation is we were randomly selected for an audit. And she said, well, if you're not using it anymore, we don't want to do the audit. But we haven't formally said we're not doing it anymore. And I would like to ask the board to officially take that position. And if someday in the future we decide we want to do it again, we can. I just would prefer not, because considering we haven't used this for over a year, I'd prefer not to be spending time on an audit if we don't have to.
How difficult is it to reinitiate that process should we want to?
It's not difficult. I mean, it's there's some bureaucracy, but it's not difficult. And I just don't know that we would do it anyway based on equity.
Sure. Any further discussion, or can we get a motion to approve the discontinuation?
So moved.
Thank you, Scott.
This is Kristen, I second.
Thank you, Kristen. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll vote via roll call. Stephanie?
Aye.
Antonia?
Sorry, aye.
Thank you. Kristen?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Arhan?
Aye.
Dominic?
Aye.
And this is Aaron. I also vote aye. So motion passes for discontinuation of the revenue capture.
Thank you.
And next up, hours.
And Karen, I believe this is you.
All right. So we just wanted to give you an update on where we're at with our hours research project. We have entered into an agreement with the Diversity Council to conduct a series of focus groups utilizing the same groups that were identified in our strategic planning process. We are also going to be implementing a community-wide survey, so getting input from our current customers, and then using some targeted postcards to hear from non-users in the community. And we'll also be distributing that survey through our website, through social media. We're using the citywide POCO survey tool, so we'll also get some additional exposure to community members who are already using that to comment on other city initiatives and projects. And we've also been looking at our usage and the bus routes and the school schedule. Mary in our office has been doing a phenomenal job putting together some great spreadsheets for us to look at. Again, what we're hoping for is to spend the next several months again doing the focus groups, conducting the survey, and then having some report later on this year, like towards the end. And Jenna mentions there are 2,400 that popped up, but it went away. 2,400 registered POLCO users, and the number of users continue to grow for the POCO tool. So, any questions?
Can you just confirm that the plan was that this would be resource neutral or staff time neutral, or how would that, if we expand hours, how would that work?
Yes, we did. When we had the initial conversation with the board, there was, it was specifically mentioned that nobody from the board was pushing us to increase the budget or to increase allocation that way. So yes, we will be bringing back a cost neutral proposal.
Thank you. I appreciate the connection with Diversity Council as well. I think that's an important data point, or data points, I should say. Okay, hearing nothing further, we'll move on to the next item. Social worker. I'm sorry, 2022 budget. Apologies.
So the 2022 budget is nearly complete, or is near completion. And so as part of that budget, we are unfreezing one of the 3 positions that were frozen in 2020. So as part of that, anytime we have positions that are unfilled, we always evaluate. And we did make some realignments where, so for example, if you look at page 75, you'll see what actually happened. So we did change some reporting, who reports to whom. We also, and it kind of tells you why. So why the position was open, and then why, why we've moved things around. So let me give you an example. So for example, we had a librarian 1 in reference that was open due to her retirement. And reference, we have a lot of computer questions that happen in reference. And we're like, we don't actually need a librarian 1 to do that job. We can actually do, we can take a library associate position and put that there to really work on digital equity and computer help, which is a better fit. And then allow the librarian position to be in reader services and technical services where we really need that for cataloging and public service. So I think we've really looked very carefully. This is all budget neutral because we didn't actually create any new positions. We just moved things around. And what I'm asking for is an actual formal approval of this realignment. Finance is asking for it. So in the past, we've seen this as operational, so we haven't necessarily brought it, but finance is asking for it. But
yeah,
we
what's
did
the
have
rationale behind finance asking us for it, given that it really isn't any sort of new ask budget-wise?
I don't know that I have a really good answer for you.
Well, I'm just asking.
My response was to just come to you and get the approval rather than. So
Got
yeah,
you. I'm happy for us to move on to that. I just feel like we should be empowering our team to make that sort of approval. And I just don't understand what we do next then to kind of make sure that next time no one has to come to us. But yes, we can move on with the approvals if you want to connect with me after.
No, I think that's fair, and I can work on that. But for expediency, because they're trying to get the budget final, it was actually faster for me to come to you. Yeah.
Got you. Well, with that being said, any further comments, or can I give a motion?
I just wanted to piggyback on what you said, Antonia. I would question, because our role as the board is not to mandate operational changes, and so I would agree that we move on to get it swiftly moved through. But in the future, I would question why we would need to be approving such a operational level procedural change, and especially because it's a budget neutral change.
Exactly, Stephanie. I completely agree with how you just phrased that. We're not meant to get involved in operations.
Okay, with that, can I get a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Second.
Can I get a thank you, Antonia? Any further discussion? Okay, we'll vote via roll call. Stephanie?
Aye.
Antonia?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Arhan?
Aye.
Dominic?
Aye.
This is Aaron. I will also vote aye. Motion carries. Thank you. we'll move on to the social worker update.
Yeah, so I was hoping to have a better update for you today. We are working with Family Service Rochester. That's who we've been partnering with around the social worker. There is a potential for another partner that would make this a full-time position, but that isn't clear yet that that's the way we'll be able to move forward. So we are absolutely working to make this come to fruition because we know that people in the library, that there are people here who need access to community resources, and we don't have all the answers, and a social worker can help us fill that gap. And so we're continuing to work on it, and I hope to have a better update for you next month. But we're definitely making progress.
Good to hear. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the director's informational items service update. Audrey?
Yeah, so last month we talked about the bookmobile being open for allowing people to be on, but with the surge that has stopped. We're continuing to provide services 7 days a week. This, as mentioned earlier, that we are back to a full masking required environment. And so, but we're seeing good numbers through our doors, and people are still continuing to use the library. So our plan is to, oh yeah, Kim, thank you for clarifying. The bookmobile is providing services in an outdoor setting. We just are not letting the public on yet. We are talking about how to get programming back going. You know, our goal was to start that September 1st, and we're doing that, but we're continuing to watch what the surge means for us for in-person gatherings. Any questions?
Just seems that we're at the mercy of the happenings around us on this one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we'll move on then. Diversity Council. We have a champion of diversity in our midst, I believe.
It was an honor. It was a wonderful event.
Yes, I appreciate the hands clapping. Is Perna here, or Karen, or can somebody give us a little more glowing, because we don't want Audrey to have to talk about herself. Can somebody fill us in a little bit more?
Yeah, it's awful when she does it here all the time, so I would love to. She doesn't.
Thank you.
So yes, Audrey was recognized as a champion of diversity from the Diversity Council at their annual celebration, and it really recognizes, and I'll read the way they describe it, individuals who have made an outstanding contribution toward creating a welcoming and inclusive community for all individuals. And Audrey is fantastic at creating as an individual, being very welcoming and inviting towards others, and also creating that culture. It really extends in her leadership style here at the library, fostering that culture here as well. So she was presented this award, and it's very, very deserving.
Love that. Thank you, Karen. Congratulations, Audrey. We all feel the same way. We really appreciate your leadership style, your leadership approach, and your diversity lens. Thank you.
Thank you. No, it takes, it's a village. It's a village. I mean, I couldn't do it without the whole team.
Absolutely. Kudos to the whole team as well. Hey, next up we have Sharing Strengths.
And we're going to turn this over to Jenna and Chow.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. I know Chow is sharing from her screen.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Jenna, why don't you go ahead and get started while I get to sharing this document?
Okay, awesome. So my name is Jenna Bowman. I am the Strategic Communications and Engagement Director. I've been with the city since July of 2018. And we are very appreciative of having this opportunity to be with you this evening to share a little bit more about strategic communications with our focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's great that Karen had brought up, the work in terms of the engagement for the hours discussion, as that'll allow us to talk a little bit about some of our tools. And we are happy. We'll try to move through the content as quickly as possible, as the questions and conversation is always really helpful, with groups, especially the library board. So, Chow, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. My name is Chow Motella. My pronouns are she, her, and I am fairly new to the city of Rochester as an organization. I began working for this organization in February, and I am excited to partner with Jenna on this because we often talk about community engagement and diversity, equity, inclusion, not as things that are singular, but things that have to work together in order to be successful. So we're excited to share this with you today. And I would start by saying that when I, first joined the organization, I was looking through documents to try and figure out how to ground our conversation and what the organization itself had done in the past. And I came across this community vision 2040, this specific excerpt that says Rochester is a city that cares, where all people are treated with dignity and respect, where residents, employees, and visitors enjoy a high quality of life, where business and industry thrive, where land and environment are renewed and sustained for the benefit of all. It is a welcome and diverse community. And I think it's really resonated with me in terms of encapsulating all the things that we think about when you're talking about a community that serves all community members.
You're muted, Jenna.
Do you think we'd all be used to this by now? It caught me. So as a part of the brand work that we did across the organization, these were 3 words that came up as a part of that: clarity, alignment, unity. And that was something that has continued past that process. And I think these 3 words really reflect what Chow was saying as far as, not siloing communication and engagement, diversity, equity, inclusion, but this active approach to for clarity, alignment, unity in those areas, including across the organization. I have typically always pointed to the library as being great examples of trailblazers and really leaders, especially in communications and engagement. And so, that's as we look to do this work and to have clarity, alignment, and unity as an organization, that's really a lot of the driving pieces here as we move forward. Sorry, Chow, you can go to the next slide.
My computer is a little stuck. That happens sometimes.
So similarly, so this is our current communications and engagement statement of intent. So consistently engage and clearly communicate news, opportunities, and information to community members in an inclusive, transparent, and thoughtful way that encourages residents to share their unique perspective and have their voice be heard, sincerely considered, and incorporated into the work of the city of Rochester. And I think, this is especially important in not just stopping at community members, but that the language after that is especially important. But not only is the language important, the actual activities of reaching that type of statement fully and consistently, I think, is also a part of the desire to get to a strategic organizational approach to this work as well, so that we don't have community members, experiencing differences, as much as possible, dependent on which department they might be engaging with or working with, but that they feel consistency across the organization, as we connect on various items. So some of you may have seen this, but back in May of 2018, former City Administrator Steve Reimer had brought this forward to the council for adoption. So this is the IEP2 spectrum of engagement. It was adopted then. I will share that we have been a little bit slow as an organization to really have this be shared across the organization internally. And then the other part of that is to use it externally with our community members. We are now more actively working to educate and engage internal teammates. And I think you can expect to see, the use of the spectrum, both in language and in practice, as we work toward developing an organizational toolkit, which we'll get to in a little bit here of talking about. But this is used across the world as a way to identify the best place for engagement on a particular project or program. You may be in multiple buckets at various parts of the process, but the biggest thing here too is that promise to the public in being able to identify the right level on the spectrum. No level is any better or any worse. Just because Empower, is the furthest on the right doesn't mean it's any better than Inform on the furthest on the left. It really is about identifying, the right level of engagement and being able to fully deliver that promise and keep that promise to the public in the way that, the engagement is occurring. I did want to note that I've gone through one training session so far with an organization, and one question that I had was, what is IAP2 doing to advance diversity, equity, inclusion? And we were very excited to hear in our July training that they have updated their statement on diversity, equity, inclusion, and they will actually be addressing a couple of things. They have representatives from across the world, so it can take a little bit of time. As Wendy, one of the board members said, a little bit more time than they typically want, but very happy to hear that they, as an organization, are making very intentional approaches to be more vocal and visible with that commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion.
And as part of, trying to understand how we engage and connect with our community, one of the things that was important for me, and I think for our organization, is to really understand who our community is and how they're represented. And a lot of times when we talk about diversity, people tend to go directly or straight to race and ethnicity. And so it was important for me to talk about our community in a way that addresses many different areas of diversity. And I also want to note that when I pulled this data, the 2020 census was not quite out yet. So this is based on a Minnesota Compass that tries to do a good job over time to update this. So these are numbers that are based on 2010 census and then as well as projections. And that is included in this link up here. So the city, about 115,000 residents as of 2019. About 15% of our residents are foreign born, which means that we have a large number of our community that don't have English as a first language and speak other languages. It notes here that about 80% of our residents are white, and we have about 20% of them that are BIPOC. For those that have a documented disability, which means they know the process of actually documenting that disability, that's about 12%. But I also note that we have lots of residents who maybe have not formalized that process or don't know how to access it, so that number might be a bit larger. We have parity in gender, so I would say, not quite. 2020 census data includes more than just male and female, so I'd be interested in seeing how that number changes and is more inclusive. And then it says that about 10% of our residents live below poverty level, and that number seems fairly low compared to the rest of the country. But what I like to point to kind of provide some perspective on that is that if you look right below, about 60% of our community members who rent their homes are cost burdened, meaning that they're paying 30% or more of their income towards housing. And then about 40% of our homeowners are cost burdened, which means they're paying, again, a large amount towards their housing that leaves quite little for other things that we need to survive, right? And then, as noted on the very bottom bullet, gender identity and sexual orientation, as well as religion and spirituality, were not available, but should be available at this next census. So I say all that because we're looking at our community and all the different ways that they are diverse, and then going into, in the next slide here, My computer keeps falling asleep, looking at our organization. And I try to separate this a little bit, looking at our leadership, right? And in our case, the only data that we have available would be race and then gender. You'll notice that when we're looking at gender, we are at about, there's been a bit of improvement. Everyone tells me that quite a number of years ago, this was not the case. It was predominantly male, but there have been changes. But when you look at our race and ethnicity numbers, we are not very diverse in our leadership. Why would this be important? It's certainly important because in leadership, this is the space where a lot of decisions are being made, a lot of policies being decided, and it also is a space where the culture of an organization is being shaped. So it's important to have folks in these positions that are representative of our community and able to bring those voices to the table. Looking forward at our organization in total, we have about 899 full-time employees. You will notice that 93% of them are white and only 6% of them are BIPOC, which is a huge difference when we're looking at the community that we serve. I will note here too that obviously these numbers have changed quite drastically, and I always bring up that I looked at these numbers of our community, and then I also looked at the Rochester Public School numbers, and those numbers are very different. We are at about 40% BIPOC and 60% white. So in the next 10, 20 years or so, there's going to be a huge shift in our own demographics. I note here that research tells us that diverse teams make higher quality decisions because they have diverse thoughts and perspectives, certainly, and then they're more innovative and usually produce equitable outcomes. And so the state projections are from 2018 going all the way to 2053. And you notice that as you look at 2053 here, that kind of mirrors what our school district numbers currently are, where we're at about 40% BIPOC students. So I say all this to say that as we're thinking about who we are as teammates, right, in our organization, and then looking at our community, there is a huge disconnect, right? And how do we then say, as an organization, that we are engaging folks in the appropriate ways if we don't really reflect their identities or their lived experiences?
So one thing we wanted to touch on is where we know we have opportunities to improve. So Polko is an online surveying platform. They acquired the National Research Center a couple years ago to bring on further depth in their researcher and polling knowledge. But using a couple past survey examples, it gets to some of what we're trying to address with what Chow outlined in the last couple of previous slides. So there had been a splash pad survey that was done over the course of less than a month, but out of the 743 respondents, 93% of those respondents identified as white, 6% as BIPOC. We also had a COVID diversity, equity, inclusion survey. This was both a randomized sample and an opt-in. In this case, you can see 82% white, 12% BIPOC. And so again, to the numbers that Chow was speaking about, there's opportunities for improvement. And then when we talk about another demographic questions, and in terms of LGBTQ+, there were 13% that identified in that space. However, there were no trans community members. And so I think it gets to the piece that, as we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, it is more than racial and ethnic diversity. And also, these are where we look at the numbers and are very mindful of not saying, Rochester community, the Rochester community says X, and identifying when to be very specific about the data that we have and the gaps that are there, that this is, while this is survey data, it is not fully reflective of who makes up our community. And as we talk about trying to improve across the organization, going into some of our most recent surveys, we are looking to make improvements by way of outreach and partnership, but it will be key that it's not just any one department using that learning and implementing change, but we as an organization are collectively sharing those learnings and talking with one another to really try to move the needle on this. Chow and I have talked about how this is not going to happen overnight and that we need to continue to stay committed. It may be that these percentage points change, but it is also that, there's a reason why we then, as Karen said too, with the library's approach, that we're coupling, a survey with community conversations, and specifically working with community members who we know we likely are not hearing from by way of our previous survey data. So I'll just say, this is one particular tool in the toolbox, but a great example. We have heard from Polko that this continues to be, a challenge for many communities, by engagement, community members. It's a luxury to have the time to engage, right? So, while it doesn't help anymore to know that we're not the only community. It does stress that, this is a long-term item that we need to stay committed to. And in that context, I know Chow is moving to the next slide here, is that just talking about completed and planned activities as well as in process. So talked a little bit about the unified city brand. Part of the big piece to that was trying to unify across the organization and have kind of that shared voice, tone, visual identity in some way, shape, or form, by the recognition and connection. I mentioned that we had a virtual training. We had about 40 teammates who were part of that virtual training provided by the public participation company, and really good conversations around what we're doing well, what opportunities we have, et cetera. We are hoping to provide another one of those trainings later this year. We are moving into meeting number 3 of our organizational-wide working group. We have representatives from, at least one representative from each department that are a part of that working group. And that working group is the one that's focused on developing that organizational approach, a strategic approach to communication engagement with that focus on diversity, equity, inclusion. I'll let Chow comment on the development of the departmental equity plans, but I'll just finish in saying the future is that toolkit. And then again, let Chow comment on those 2 bullets under the planned activities as well.
Thanks, Jenna. What I would mention about that is beyond the assessment in the demographics and numbers that I shared, we also did some internal work and came out with some priorities for our organization going forward that is specific to DEI. The first objective would be retention and recruitment of diverse staff and teammates. The second one is DEI professional development. And then the third one is community connection and engagement. And so I've often told Jenna that we can't have community engagement without community connection, and that it's important for us to work on those connections. So we're not going over to our communities and engaging with them only when we have questions, but we're genuinely working to make sure that we have relationships that go both ways with our community members, so that when we go to them in engagement, it doesn't seem like that's the only time that we're making an effort to connect with them. So tied to the equity plans, that each department is making, every department then is working on their own diversity, equity, inclusion plan that has goals tied to those 3 main goals, right? So they, we've met one-on-one and had those conversations, and then they get to discuss within their own department, what are they going to prioritize, what can they do in those 3 main areas. The same is true for professional development, where we're working on professional development that is organization-wide, so that we can have, again, terms that we agree on in terms of definitions of what diversity, equity, inclusion is and is not. A diversity, equity, inclusion statement that is organization-wide. And then each department then would have their own professional development that is really focused on the work that they do. Because some of the feedback that I received was, we go and get a training, and then we go back to our desks, and what does that mean for the work we do? So we want to make sure that we're having professional development that is really relevant. So what the library might cover on DEI professional development might be very different from what, say, the fire department does when it comes to those department-specific learnings that they need to do. The idea of an organizational equity plan, everybody's really interested in wanting to know, and when do we get there? And I say, we can't get to that organization-wide equity plan when we are not quite connecting and engaging the community to the extent that we would like to. So I think the work of this community engagement DEI work group is really important, so that when we get to the point where we're going to our community and saying, we would like your feedback on an equity plan, we have genuine and authentic relationships with them. And I say all that to say that, part of the work that we're doing is in focusing that we have to move forward together. So as we're developing our DEI goals and each department is developing their goals, they're all aligned with the rest of our organization, and that we're not working on our own in different silos, and that we're able to work together like Jenna and I are working on this DEI work. So if you have any questions or thoughts, we are happy to chat with you about that as well.
And I do want to point out how this aligns with our existing strategic plan and our existing action plans, that really this is how we're working together as a city organization.
That's really great data. Thank you for sharing that. I had some eye-opening moments there. Interesting to extrapolate what our community will look like in 20 years and how we can best prepare for that. Comments from the board?
I think that was a lot of excellent data, and I was just wondering if we could have the document shared with us. I'd love to review it, at my leisure as well.
We could certainly do that, yeah. And so Audrey, would we send that to you and you could share it with the rest of the board?
Sure, yes. Any other questions for Jenna and Chow?
Just want to again say thank you, and I'm sure we can be back. So as Chow said, we're all anxiously waiting the census data, but as we progress, and I imagine get further down the road with the working group and the other items that we have mentioned, we'd be happy to come back with this group and give an update, or even just provide the update by way of Audrey as well. So just thank you for the ability to share this information and connect on this topic tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your efforts here. Really appreciated. Okay, board, we'll move on to any questions, comments more broadly. Okay, hearing none, I will adjourn the meeting. Thanks everyone and have a great rest of the month.